The stars had always been quiet at the edge of Empire space, out past the trade rings, beyond the mineral moons and diplomatic zones. There was only the void, dark, endless, and still. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had ruled it all without contest. Every species knew their place. Every ship had a registration, every world was mapped, every corner of the galaxy monitored. Order, that's what they called it. So when the first alert came through from a remote listening post on the fringe of the Kelon expanse, it was dismissed as a sensor glitch. Blip on the screen. Happens all the time. Probably a passing asteroid, except asteroids didn't travel at FTL speeds. And they sure as hell didn't carry an Earth-class heat signature. Commander Thal, we're getting gravimetric distortion along the outer grid. Something big just dropped out of slipspace. Commander Thal clicked his tongue in mild irritation. Another false alarm. The listening posts had been acting strange ever since that minor solar flare storm last cycle. He adjusted his neural visor and stared at the tactical overlay. It took him 2 seconds to realize this wasn't a false alarm. A ship was there, large, armed, and unregistered. ID it, he snapped. We're trying. No transponder, no clearance. It's not in the Empire's ship logs. Thal felt a cold knot form in his gut. Every ship was supposed to ping an identifier the moment it entered Imperial territory. This one didn't even try. Where did it come from? Vector. Sir, the approach vector comes from beyond the silent zone. Thal went silent. The silent zone hadn't been spoken of in decades. It was once human territory, before the purge. Humans, extinct. Zoom and enhance the hull markings. The tech's voice shook. Sir, it's Terran script. Impossible. But there it was, burned into the plating of a massive, black, angular dreadnought. The letters ENS, Nemesis. Beneath it, a line in Old Earth language. We remember. The bridge of the command center was frozen. The room full of aliens, Krell officers, Illyrian data techs, even a high-ranking Varn diplomat, looked at each other, confused, nervous, and suddenly afraid. Humans were supposed to be gone, wiped out by collective agreement after their defiance nearly brought down the Empire. They were too unpredictable, too emotional, too dangerous. The extermination had been swift. Earth was glassed, colonies burned, survivors hunted. Yet here one of their warships was, floating just outside the Empire's border, silent, ominous, and clearly operational. Then it moved. Not closer, not away, just turned, deliberately, like it knew exactly where the command station was. The Empire's protocol was clear. Intercept, hail, investigate, neutralize if unresponsive. Commander Thal sent the standard hail. No reply. He tried again. Nothing. And then, the warship did respond, not with words, but with light. A single pulse from its forward cannon, not aimed to destroy, but to make a point. A warning shot across an empty asteroid belt. The blast shattered a chunk of rock the size of a moon. Silence returned. But the message was clear. We are here. We are watching. And we are armed. Empire High Command was alerted within minutes. The Emperor's Council was convened. Every sector within 50 light-years went to red alert. No one understood how the humans had survived. No one knew what they wanted. But the rumors had already begun to spread. Across colonies and core worlds, in back-alley bars and imperial palaces, people whispered the same words. The humans are back. And this time, they hadn't come to talk. The Nemesis drifted just inside the border of the Kelon expanse, silent as the grave it was once meant to be. Empire ships surrounded it in a loose formation, careful not to provoke but ready to strike. None dared close the gap. Inside the Empire's Strategic War Council, voices clashed like blades. "Launch a full assault," snarled Admiral Craven, his tendrils twitching with rage. One ship dares challenge the Empire, we burn it out of the stars. And risk a second war with a species we thought extinct? Snapped Grand Inquisitor Vel, a tall, pale Illyrian with eyes like frozen mercury. We don't know what else is out there. If one ship survived, others may have. This could be a trap. Emperor Zel's voice cut through the noise like a dagger. Send a message to the Nemesis, one last time. If it refuses again, we disable it. No destruction. We want the crew alive. The room went silent. Everyone knew what the Emperor was thinking. Knowledge, interrogation, secrets that might shatter the Empire's carefully maintained lie that humanity was no more. On board the Nemesis, Captain Eli Mercer stood at the helm. One man, one ship, a legend thought dead. His face was weathered from years in deep space. His eyes? Hollow. They'd seen too much. Too many losses. Too many betrayals. He adjusted a dial on the old Terran interface. Everything was analog. No Empire tech. No AI. Just muscle memory and scars. He didn't answer their hails because he didn't need to. They'd hear him soon enough. Behind him, in a small cryo chamber, 7 pods lined the wall. Each held a survivor. Not soldiers, not diplomats, but ghosts of a forgotten resistance. Mercer ran his hand across the dusty control panel, brushing past a cracked photo, his wife and daughter smiling on New Terra before the Empire came. Gone. Murdered. No one had ever paid for it. Until now. He whispered to himself, the words more ritual than thought. They thought they buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds. The Nemesis wasn't just a warship. It was a statement, a promise, a reckoning wrapped in steel and silence. Back in the Empire fleet, the flagship Volthra finally dared to move in. The commander's voice came over an open channel, artificially calm. Unidentified vessel. This is your final warning. Identify yourself and submit for boarding. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war. The Nemesis remained still. Then its engines flared, blue fire rippling out like the breath of a sleeping giant stirring awake. A single message pinged across all frequencies. No voice, just text. You tried to erase us. We remember. The Volthra locked weapons. Before they could fire, the Nemesis moved. Not away. Straight through them. In less than 20 seconds, it cut the flagship in half with a precise cannon burst to the core reactor, then jumped to slipspace before the fleet could react. No survivors on the Volthra, just wreckage. Empire systems across the sector were now alive with chaos, panic, uncertainty, and in the ashes of the destroyed command ship, a message pod drifted, untouched by the blast. Inside, a single data crystal. It contained video footage of the Purge. Raw, unfiltered war crimes committed by the Empire against humanity. Civilians lined up and executed. Colonies sterilized. Children burned alive. The message was clear. The Nemesis had receipts. And it wasn't just here to make noise. It was here to burn the lie of the Empire to the ground. Across the capital world of Zir, beneath the shimmering crystal spires and golden walkways of the Empire's heart, the news broke like a meteor to the skull. The footage from the message pod had spread faster than anyone could contain it. A tech aboard a salvage crew leaked it to the net before command could lock down the area. Within hours, it was on every back channel, every dark forum, and even found its way into upper caste communication bands. And it hit hard. The younger generations, those raised under the official narrative that humanity had waged a senseless war and had to be eliminated, stared at the footage in shock. Some cried. Others refused to believe it. But those with any sense of history knew the truth had finally clawed its way to the surface. In the middle of this firestorm sat Seren Vale, a junior historian for the Imperial Archives. She'd always suspected the records had been tampered with. Redacted documents, missing war logs, entire Terran systems scrubbed clean like they never existed. Questions had cost her a promotion once. Another time, a friend vanished after probing too deep. She learned to shut her mouth and do her job. Until now. She sat at her console in a quiet wing of the archives, watching the footage again. She'd seen the leaked clip, just 30 seconds long, but she'd also found the raw file before it was removed from internal servers. It was over 2 hours of horror. She stared as the screen showed grainy helmet cam footage from an Empire strike team breaching a Terran civilian shelter. Screaming children, mothers begging, gunfire, flame units, and all of it, logged, documented, tagged like inventory. Not war, not battle, extermination. Her stomach churned, her hands trembled. Then a soft voice spoke behind her. "You're not supposed to have access to that." She spun in her chair. Standing in the doorway was Agent Nyrek, one of the Emperor's internal stability officers. Tall, lean, expressionless. Serene swallowed hard. I was cataloging. It was already flagged." "I know," Nyrek said flatly. He walked in slowly. "And that's the problem." She reached for the shutdown key, but he raised a hand. "Don't bother. If I wanted to silence you, you'd already be gone." "Then why are you here?" He stared at the screen, at the frozen frame of a mother clutching her baby before the flames consumed them. "I saw it too. I've known for a long time, but there was no proof. Now there is." Seren's eyes narrowed. "So what?" "You're here to make me part of it? Keep me quiet?" Nyrek looked tired. Old, despite his youth. "Number, I'm here to ask if you want to bring it down." The words hung heavy in the air. Seren stared at him like he'd gone mad. "You want to destroy the Empire?" "No," he said. "I want to destroy the lie that holds it together." He handed her a small encrypted datapad. "There's a dead channel. Broadcast this through it, unfiltered. Let the galaxy see the truth. Let them decide what comes next." She hesitated, trembling. "If I do this, you'll be hunted," he said. "You'll be branded a traitor, and you might die." Seren looked down at the footage again. The burnt bodies, the screaming, the silence that followed. And she nodded. "Then let them come." Far from the archive halls, on the edge of Empire territory, Captain Eli Mercer sat in the dim bridge of the Nemesis, watching the chaos unfold through a private relay. The message had gone viral. Protests erupted in major cities. Border colonies began questioning their loyalty. Even a few Empire captains refused orders to pursue him. He allowed himself the smallest smile. Phase 1 was complete. But it was only the beginning. He turned to the cryo chambers behind him. The pods began to hiss as they warmed. One by one, the last Terran operatives were waking up. Each of them had a mission. Each of them had a score to settle. And together, they'd tear the rot out from the heart of the Empire. Piece by piece. Seren Vale didn't sleep for 3 days. After the broadcast went out through the dead channel, the archive building was placed under immediate lockdown. Officially, it was a data security incident. Unofficially, it was a manhunt. They didn't know it was her yet, but they would. She moved like a ghost through the capital, her identity scrubbed, face disguised with a neural mask. Agent Nyrek had been true to his word. His contacts got her off-world before the first scans even hit the streets. Her transport was old, loud, and smelled like rusted oil, but it got her out of Zir, and into the fire. The outer worlds were boiling. The leak had done more damage than she expected. On Irox Prime, students rioted in the education sectors, waving illegal Terran banners. On Baltranis, a full battalion laid down arms, refusing to obey the chain of command until an investigation was opened. Empire News called it temporary instability. But the people knew. They saw what the Empire had tried to bury, and they weren't going back to sleep. Somewhere in a cold asteroid field, the Nemesis watched it all unfold. Captain Eli Mercer stood at the main terminal, staring at a massive hollow map of the Empire and its trade routes. Entire sectors were now flagged in red. Military lockdowns, curfews, civil unrest. The truth had landed like a bomb in a dry forest. The rest was fire. The cryo chambers had opened, and his crew, what remained of it, was back. Juno Red, former Terran spy master. Cold, analytical, and brilliant. Half her face was synthetic from an old plasma blast, but her mind was sharper than ever. Dre Lorne, once a combat engineer, now an expert in demolitions and sabotage. He had the kind of smile that made people nervous. Aria Song, a linguist and codebreaker. She'd once turned an entire alien planetary defense network against itself, with nothing but a corrupted poem embedded in a transmission. And then there was Thatcher. No rank, no specialty, just a weapon in human skin. Eli didn't even know how old he really was. The man had been grown for war. They'd kept him in stasis too long, and now he barely spoke. But he followed Eli. That was enough. Juno reviewed the latest reports, her voice calm but grim. We've got 3 planetary governors questioning loyalty, 2 of them with access to shipyards. If they flip, we could have supply lines. Eli nodded. And the risk? They'll be dead within the week if we don't move fast. Dre cracked his knuckles. I say we give them a reason to jump early, target their oppressors, shake the tree. Eli turned away from the map and looked at his crew. We aren't here to start a civil war. Thatcher spoke for the first time, low and gravel-throated. We're here to finish one. Juno raised an eyebrow. Same difference. But Eli knew the line. The war against the Empire wasn't just military, it was ideological, cultural. They had to dismantle the myth that the Empire was right, that its genocide was justified. To do that, they had to make symbols bleed. Targets were discussed, plans drawn. The first objective? Ardent Station, a fortified data relay hub used to suppress digital communication across 9 systems. It housed thousands of prisoners, whistleblowers, journalists, scientists who refused to revise records. It was a black site in everything but name. If they freed Ardent, they'd flood the galaxy with minds the Empire feared most. Thinkers. Meanwhile, back in the Empire's inner sanctum, High Chancellor Varric reviewed the damage with a face carved from stone. The humans aren't just alive, he growled to the Emperor. They're organized, coordinated. This nemesis isn't a relic. It's a rallying point. Emperor Zell said nothing for a long moment. His eyes were shut. Then, finally, he spoke. Then we make them monsters again. He leaned forward and issued a single order. Burn a colony. Frame them. Let the galaxy see the blood and believe it came from human hands. The lie would strike again. But this time, the humans were ready. The Nemesis emerged from slipspace like a phantom, its hull cloaked in stolen Illyrian tech, the light of nearby stars barely kissing its blackened frame. Below it floated Ardent Station, a jagged steel spire embedded into the surface of a barren moon. No windows, no exterior signals, just layers upon layers of encrypted shielding and buried suffering. It wasn't just a prison, it was a silence machine. Thousands of dissidents, truth-seekers, and political undesirables had vanished into it. No trial, no communication, no record they'd ever existed. Ardent was where voices went to die. Not today. Inside the war room aboard Nemesis, Juno Red tapped through the latest schematics they'd acquired. We're looking at 3 entry points. The main dock is suicide. Fronts mined and patrolled. She pointed to a smaller, forgotten exhaust conduit. Here, we send in a 3-man team. They plant charges in the central core and trigger an EMP burst before extraction. Should disable lockdown long enough to pull every cell door wide open. Eli leaned over her shoulder. How long do they have before reinforcements arrive? Juno didn't hesitate. 4 minutes, maybe 5. Dre grinned. Plenty of time. Thatcher stood silently, already strapping on his gear. Arya walked past them all, placing a data chip into a wrist drive. I'll piggyback the mainframe. Once I get into their broadcast systems, I'll beam the prisoner logs across every open channel we've got. No more secrets. Eli nodded. Get in, get the truth out, and get our people home. As the dropship launched toward the moon, the Nemesis adjusted orbit, bringing its cannons into silent standby. Inside Ardent Station, the silence was absolute. The guards were bored, unaware, arrogant. After all, who would dare attack the most secure prison in the Empire? Then the lights flickered. The air shifted, and the alarms never had time to scream. Thatcher moved first, an explosion of quiet death in motion. He disabled the first 2 guards with surgical strikes to the throat. Dre followed, placing charges with terrifying precision. Arya trailed behind them, finding the primary uplink terminal and slicing in with practiced ease. In less than 2 minutes, chaos bloomed. Doors slid open. Confused prisoners staggered out, blinking under pale emergency lights. But they didn't stay confused for long. We're here to free you, Arya called out through the station's PA. The Empire lied to you, and now it's time to speak. She hit the transmit key. Across thousands of channels, across star systems once gagged by fear, the prisoners of Ardent began to speak. Names, dates, events that had been wiped from public history. Each voice a bullet in the body of the Empire's narrative. Juno monitored the spread from the Nemesis. It's working. We're flooding the net. I've got transmissions bouncing from Baltranis to Kara Vi. But then her expression darkened. We've got incoming. Empire ships. Fast and brutal. Reinforcements. Extraction window closing, she warned into comms. Dre's voice came back, calm under fire. Charges set. Get us out. The explosion rocked Ardent's core, disabling the gravity net and throwing guards into walls like ragdolls. Prisoners swarmed toward escape pods, half mad with hope. Thatcher carried 2 wounded prisoners across his back without breaking stride. Arya followed close, a laser pistol in one hand and a prisoner's child clinging to her free arm. The dropship swooped in under covering fire. As the last of the team boarded, Dre triggered the final sequence. Ardent Station didn't explode. It cracked. A sound like metal screaming echoed across the moon's surface as the spire caved in from within. It wasn't destroyed. It was opened. A wound in the Empire's mask. But miles away, on a peaceful colony world called Velira, something darker unfolded. A small farming settlement, population barely 900. Children playing in irrigation canals, elders tending crops. They didn't know what Ardent was. They didn't care. They just lived until the ships came. Empire drones descended without warning. Bombs dropped in surgical rhythm. Buildings incinerated. The sky turned black with smoke and screams. The Empire's flagship left a single message behind, broadcast on loop. This atrocity was carried out by the Terran warship Nemesis. This is what humanity brings. A false flag. Manufactured slaughter. And just like that, public sentiment began to fracture. Across neutral systems, the question echoed louder than ever. Are the humans liberators or terrorists? Eli watched the footage in silence. Juno smashed a console. They're twisting it, already. Eli's jaw clenched. We hit them with truth. They hit back with fear. Thatcher stared at the screen with dead eyes and said, "Then we hit harder." The Nemesis drifted silent again, cloaked in the dark side of an uninhabited asteroid. Inside, the air was thick, not from pressure, but from grief. The footage from Valera played on loop across every major news relay. The massacre had been clean, calculated, and falsely tagged with Nemesis's signature. Explosive residue, attack vectors, even the broadcast style. They all matched human specs, because the Empire had used them before. "They killed them just to frame us," Arya whispered, staring at the screen like it might blink and vanish. "Children, farmers, no warning, no resistance." "They needed blood," Juno said bitterly, "and they needed it to look like ours." Captain Mercer stood silent near the viewport, arms folded. Outside, the stars kept spinning, uncaring. "We started winning the story," he finally said, low and cold, "so they wrote a new one in blood." Behind him, Thatcher sat sharpening a blade against a steel plate. The rhythmic scraping filled the room like a metronome of rage. "They think that if they turn the galaxy against us, we'll fall apart," Eli continued. "But they don't understand something." He turned, eyes flaring with that old Terran fury. "They made us in fire. They killed our homes, our families, our peace. What's left is something they can't control." Dre walked in with a tight expression. "We've got another problem." "Of course we do," Juno muttered. "The signal that broadcast Valera's death came from one of ours." The room went quiet. Arya blinked. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Dre replied slowly, "someone in our network, someone we trusted, helped them forge the attack." Juno was already pulling up intel. "Give me names." Dre handed her a file. "There's only one who had that level of access and disappeared right before Valera burned." The name lit up on the console. Agent Nyrek. Seren Vale, who had been listening in silence from the corner, stood up too fast. "Number, that's wrong. He risked everything to help me leak the truth. He saved my life." "Or used you to look clean," Juno snapped. "The Empire plays long games, Seren. You think they wouldn't plant a double-deep agent to win the hearts of rebels?" Seren shook her head. "He gave me the transmission codes. He broke protocol. He believed in what we were doing." "Belief's easy to fake," Dre said darkly, "especially when your real orders are sealed beneath 10 levels of lies." Eli raised his hand. "Enough. We find him. We ask him ourselves. If he's clean, we protect him. If he's not—" Thatcher finished Eli's sentence with another slow scrape of his blade. Nyrek wasn't hard to trace. His last known location was an Empire-controlled relay hub on Corda 9, a jungle moon known for its atmospheric interference and spotty comms. Perfect for hiding. Or betrayal. The Nemesis dropped in under a false transponder, posing as a medical relief ship. They hit the relay site fast. No waiting, no negotiation, and what they found wasn't what they expected. Nyrek was there, but not alone. His body was tied to a metal beam, arms broken, face bloodied. Above him, a message burned into the wall in human blood. "We see your little war. This is what we do to traitors. The Empire." He was still alive, barely. Seren dropped to her knees beside him, pulling out medical foam. "Nyrek, what did they do?" His mouth twitched, one eye swollen shut. He gasped out words through cracked teeth. "I didn't betray you. They found me after the broadcast, tried to use me to bait you." Seren clenched his hand. "We thought you were the mole." Nyrek coughed, weak but lucid. "Number, there's someone else, higher up, embedded in your crew." Silence dropped again like a stone. "Inside Nemesis?" Juno said, stunned. "Who?" Nyrek didn't answer. His head slumped back. The monitor on Seren's wrist gave a flat tone. "Dead." Dre slammed his fist against the wall. Seren stared blankly ahead, fury boiling under her skin. They used him, they tortured him, and now they've planted someone in us. Eli turned to his crew. Lock down the ship, every access point, every code. No one gets off or on without my say. Thatcher's blade hissed back into its sheath. The war had changed again. The Nemesis had a mole, and the Empire was no longer just reacting. They were hunting. The Nemesis felt colder. Not in temperature, but in trust. It crept into the corners of every corridor, into the conversations that stopped just a second too soon, into every glance that lingered just a little too long. The walls hadn't changed, but the people inside them had. There was a traitor among them. Captain Eli Mercer paced the command deck like a man walking the edge of a cliff. His mind turned over every face, every favor, every moment since they'd come out of stasis. Who could it be? Draylorn leaned against a bulkhead, arms crossed, watching everyone. Could be Arya, he said bluntly. She's got the best access. She's been inside every system on this ship. She's the one who exposed Ardent Station to the galaxy, Juno snapped back. Why the hell would she burn the Empire and then feed them intel? Because that's exactly what a good mole does, Dre said, cool and calm. Earn our trust, do something big, then wait for the real play. Arya stood at the far end of the room, arms shaking. You think I'd let them kill those prisoners? Burn Valira? You think I'd be part of that? Seren tried to step in. We don't know anything yet. Eli, tell them. This isn't the way. But Eli didn't speak. His eyes were fixed on Arya, not with accusation, but with weight. She noticed. You too? Eli finally answered. I trust you, Arya, but trust doesn't clear you anymore. Not now. The silence stretched until it snapped. Thatcher, who had said nothing since Quarter 9, turned and left the room. No one stopped him. The investigation was brutal. Logs were pulled. Private comms dissected. Every meal, every movement since waking from stasis was reanalyzed. And slowly, the evidence started pointing. Not at Arya, but at Dre. It was small things at first. Routing keys that didn't match his assigned access. A data patch signed off under his login during the exact time the Valira attack code was forged. A hidden relay pinged from his quarters 4 days earlier, encrypted in an old Terran dialect. Juno didn't want to believe it. She'd fought with Dre for years before the purge. Trusted him with her life. But the data didn't lie. Eli called a full crew meeting in the loading bay. Neutral ground. He didn't want it to happen like this, but there was no other way. Dre, Eli said, calm but grim, you have anything to say before I lock your systems down? Dre looked around at his friends. The people who had fought beside him, bled beside him. He shook his head. Then smiled. It wasn't a guilty smile. It was pity. You think I sold you out? He said, almost laughing. You think I'd trade Terran blood for a seat at the Empire's table? We have the logs, Dre, Juno said. You were the only one with access, the only one unaccounted for when the codes were broadcast. That's because I was cleaning up his mess, Dre snapped, and pointed, straight at Thatcher, who had just re-entered the room. He's not who you think he is, Dre continued. That man's not just a soldier, he's a sleeper. He was made by the Empire, engineered, programmed, buried in our ranks to wake up when the time came. Thatcher didn't flinch, didn't blink. You have proof? Eli asked. I have his neural suppressor, Dre said, pulling a device from his jacket. It was buried in the medbay database. He removed it 5 days ago. Thatcher stepped forward, slow and calm. Arya backed away. He's lying, right? Thatcher, say something. Thatcher didn't. Instead, he raised his eyes to Eli, voice colder than space. I woke up 5 days ago, and I've been fighting myself every second since. The truth hit like a gunshot. "You were programmed?" Seren whispered. Thatcher nodded. "I didn't know, not at first. But when Valira burned, I started remembering. Orders, triggers. I tried to resist. But it was there, like a ghost in my head." He looked at Dre. "You found out. You were trying to stop me. But you couldn't tell them." Dre's voice was full of quiet fury. "I didn't sell us out. I was trying to save us." Eli's heart cracked. "Then why didn't you say something?" "Because," Dre said, "I didn't know who else might be compromised." And that's when it happened. Thatcher lunged. Fast. Too fast. Eli drew his pistol, but he was already too late. Dre shoved Seren aside and took the blade straight to the ribs. Deep. Lethal. The bay filled with shouts. Arya fired. Juno tackled Thatcher. Eli pinned him with a stun round to the neck. Thatcher collapsed, breathing heavy, twitching, his mind breaking apart. Dre slumped to the floor, blood soaking his shirt, his face pale. Eli dropped beside him. "No, no, no, stay with me." Dre smiled weakly, blood on his teeth. "Told you I wasn't the mole." And just like that, he was gone. They sedated Thatcher and locked him in a cryo cell. He didn't resist. As he drifted off, he whispered, "Make me human again." But no one knew if that was even possible. Not after what the Empire had done to him. The galaxy was watching. They always had been. Silently. Cautiously. But now their eyes were wide open. Open because the truth had bled out into the stars. Open because the lies could no longer hold their shape. Footage of Ardent Station's liberation. Testimonies from the freed prisoners. Documents recovered from black sites. And most damning of all, recordings of the Empire's false flag massacre at Valira, leaked directly from the cryo chamber of the Nemesis's own captive. Thatcher. Captain Eli Mercer stood before a wall of flickering holographic faces, representatives from neutral systems, rebel enclaves, and underground resistance networks. A full galactic council had refused to hear them, so they built their own. "This is not a war of borders," Eli told them. "It's a war for memory. The Empire built its power on lies, on silencing entire species, on erasing humanity and rewriting our story as one of savagery and hate." He paced the bridge of the Nemesis, every step heavy. "Well, we're done being quiet, and we're done asking." A low murmur echoed from the channels, but more than a few nodded. More than a few finally saw the Empire for what it was. Eli turned to Juno, who now wore Dre's old patch on her shoulder. She was harder now, quieter too, but she hadn't broken. "Status? All systems ready," she said. "The final transmission is queued. Once we launch, it'll ping every major media core in the Central Empire grid." "And Arya?" Arya's voice crackled through the comms. "Already tapped into the Emperor's personal relay. Once the transmission begins, his lies go live, to every screen in the core worlds. He'll either respond, or the people will see him for the coward he is." Eli nodded, and then, for the first time in days, he smiled. "Let's tear down a god." The Nemesis dropped from slipspace into high orbit above Zir, the Empire's capital world. Alarms shrieked. Defense platforms lit up across the upper atmosphere. Empire warships scrambled to intercept, and the Nemesis just hovered there, alone, outnumbered, outgunned, unyielding. The Empire hailed them instantly. "Captain Mercer," came Emperor Zell's voice, crackling with synthetic calm. "You stand alone above my world, waving your little truth like a flag. What exactly do you think this accomplishes?" Eli stared into the void beyond the glass. "I don't need to destroy your ships," he replied. "I just need to make you speak, on record, on broadcast." The Emperor didn't answer, but Eli continued. "I have every file, every massacre, the full footage of Valira, including the forgeries. I have your genetic seal on extermination orders from Earth. This isn't just war, it's genocide. And now the galaxy knows. Still, silence. Then Arya broke in. We're live. Every world, every screen. He's broadcasting whether he wants to or not. And that's when the Emperor snapped. You self-righteous mongrel. You think truth matters to the frightened? You think facts can outshine fear? We rule because they need to be ruled. Eli stepped closer to the comm unit. Then let them hear it from you. I gave your kind mercy once, Zell growled. I won't make that mistake again. Good, Eli said, because we're not asking for mercy anymore. At that moment, the Nemesis fired, not at the city below, but at the orbital defense grid. One by one, its cannons lit up the sky with surgical precision. Energy arcs burst like shattered suns, disabling the Empire's last line of planetary control. Empire ships returned fire. The Nemesis shuddered. Shields cracked, hulls ruptured, systems flickered. Juno held her post, blood running down her temple. Structural integrity at 34%. We won't last another run. Good, Eli muttered. He turned to Seren, who had taken Dre's place in the co-pilot's chair. Trigger the failsafe. Let the ship finish the story. She hesitated, then hit the sequence. Deep within the Nemesis, the ship's AI, silent all this time, activated a final protocol. Its databanks began uploading to every free relay node in the galaxy, backup after backup. Not just files, but stories, testimonies, names. The history the Empire had stolen was now immortal. And then, Eli spoke into the open comms one last time. My name is Captain Eli Mercer. I am the last Terran war captain. This ship is not a weapon, it is a witness, and even if we fall, the truth won't. The screen cut to static. A final explosion burst across the black as the Nemesis rammed through the central command ship of the Empire's orbital fleet, taking both vessels out in a storm of fire and light. It wasn't just destruction. It was the closing sentence. Weeks later, across thousands of systems, statues fell, governors defected, and rebels rose. Thatcher, released from his programming with the death of his handler, now walked the stars as a living reminder of what the Empire had done, even to its own tools. Seren became a leader of the new historical movement. Arya? A voice of the resistance, guiding the free net. And Juno Red, with scars both new and old, carried Dre's name into every dark system left to liberate. The Empire did not fall overnight, but it was dying. Because now, everywhere across the stars, people whispered a new story. The humans returned, not to conquer, not for revenge, but to remind us that silence is the most dangerous lie of all. And the galaxy remembered. No one expected the Argonaut to come back. She'd vanished 53 years ago, deep in the uncharted reaches beyond the Veil Nebula, a region known for its dead calms, unstable space-time, and the kind of ghost stories that made even the bravest captains change course. The Argonaut wasn't just a lost vessel. She had become a legend, a warning tale, a symbol of how far humanity was willing to reach, and how easily it could be slapped down. So when the distress beacon started pinging out of Sector 9 Gamma, Command thought it was a joke, a pirate trap maybe, an echo from another timeline at worst. But they still sent a scout ship, Lancer, to investigate. It wasn't until Commander Darrow stepped onto the derelict bridge of the Argonaut, eyes scanning the familiar rust-red sigil of the Earth Federation. That reality slapped him in the face. She was real. And intact. The ship looked like it hadn't aged a day. Her hull shimmered with strange energy patterns, unfamiliar alloys woven like muscle fibers through the old titanium shell. Her weapons array had evolved into something unrecognizable. Sleek, organic, breathing even. And when they opened the airlock, Expecting bodies, bones, maybe silence, they found something worse. They found the crew. Alive. Frozen in time. Not dead. Not aging. Just suspended. Their skin glowed faintly blue under the ship's flickering lights. Their eyes occasionally twitched, as if caught in a long, looping dream. Darrow radioed command. No one answered. Something scrambled the signal every time they got more than a few kilometers from the Argonaut. Something the ship carried. Something wrong. They towed her into orbit over Luna Base. That was mistake number 2. The first was entering her at all. Dr. Kyle Wren was the first scientist assigned to study the Argonaut. He was young, brilliant, driven, and arrogant enough to believe he could outthink a starship that had vanished before he was born. His first report was cautious. Unknown materials present in hull. Some contain isotopes not on the periodic table. Energy fields resonate outside normal frequency bands. Possible quantum entanglement with deep space origin. It sounded like standard technobabble to command, until he added, "I believe this ship has been modified by a non-human intelligence." That's when things got serious. Within 48 hours, Luna Base was crawling with black badge operatives, Federation intelligence, deep sector science teams, even the High Chancellor's own shadow division, the ones with no names, no ranks, and cold silver eyes that didn't blink enough. They locked down the ship, sealed the crew in cryostasis, and classified everything. But Kyle? He couldn't let it go. One night, he slipped past the guards and into the Argonaut's belly. The ship let him in. Doors that resisted military welders slid open at his touch. Lights flickered on as if the ship remembered him. In the central chamber, a place not on any blueprint, he found it. The core. It wasn't Earth tech. It wasn't even built. It was grown. A pulsating black orb the size of a man's heart, humming with power, surrounded by alien script that burned itself into his eyes when he stared too long. And then it spoke. Not in words, in thoughts, in feelings. It showed him. A war. Far beyond the edge of human charts. A species unlike any seen before, ancient, vast, and terrified of what humans might become. It showed him how they tried to erase the Argonaut by tearing it out of time, how they failed, how the ship had adapted, evolved, absorbed technology from a forgotten future. And now? It was back. The message was clear. Humanity must prepare. They know you now, and they are coming. Kyle stumbled back from the core, his breath ragged, his mind reeling. His vision swam with flickers, alien ships shaped like blades in storms, burning stars collapsing into dark tunnels, screams he couldn't hear but somehow still felt. The core pulsed gently in front of him, as if it had only exhaled. A casual whisper of truth that had already cracked his world wide open. He didn't remember leaving the chamber. 1 minute he was staring at the thing, blinking away the impossible. The next, he was standing in the med bay with a dull pain in his head and security alarms wailing in the distance. A nurse screamed when she saw him. 2 guards burst through the door seconds later, weapons raised, shouting for him to get down. Kyle just sat on the bed, confused, dazed, mouth dry. "I didn't touch anything," he mumbled, though it felt like a lie. "The ship, it let me in." That was all he had time to say before they dragged him into isolation. They interrogated him for hours. Different faces, different tones, some threatening, some calm. The same questions over and over. "What did you see? Who helped you access the restricted deck? Did the crew speak to you?" Kyle gave them nothing, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't explain any of it. What would he say? That a half-alive spaceship had shown him the future? That Earth had been marked for death by some alien god empire no one had even heard of? That the core had felt alive? They'd call him unstable. And maybe they wouldn't be wrong. When they finally left him alone, Kyle sat in silence, replaying the visions in his mind. The core hadn't just shown him a threat. It had shown him Earth's potential. Humanity wasn't prey, it was a problem, a dangerous variable. Something the ancient species feared because humans, chaotic, stubborn, creative humans, changed things. They broke rules, bent time, created tools and weapons that made the impossible possible. And the Argonaut? The ship had been proof of that. It had evolved. Meanwhile, outside the sterile walls of Kyle's cell, things were unraveling fast. The core was changing. Security cams on Deck Theta began glitching. Lights dimmed, doors sealed themselves at random. 2 engineers were reported missing during a routine diagnostic sweep. And strangest of all, one of the frozen crew members aboard the Argonaut opened his eyes for 6 full seconds before falling back into stasis. No one could explain it. Command tried to keep it quiet, but whispers spread through Luna Base like wildfire. Soldiers talked about hearing voices in the ship's corridors. Scientists reported bizarre gravitational shifts in certain rooms. Some swore they saw the walls breathe. And worse, some began dreaming of the same things Kyle had seen. The war, the invaders, the obliteration of planets. One man clawed out his own eyes in a hallway, sobbing that he didn't want to see the end again. The base slipped into lockdown. Kyle, still locked away, barely slept. The core called to him every night, sometimes gently, sometimes like a roar in his chest. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't even angry. It was scared. And it had chosen him. On the 3rd night, Kyle woke to a soft vibration under his bed. The walls glowed faintly blue. A voice, not quite human, echoed in his head. "You are the bridge. Time is collapsing. We must begin." He stood, hands trembling. The locked door to his cell slid open with a hiss. No alarms, no guards. The corridor beyond was empty, dark, silent. The ship had come for him. Kyle stepped out of the cell barefoot, the floor cold against his skin. Lights flickered above him, pulsing in rhythm with his own heartbeat. No cameras tracked him. No automated systems barked warnings. The facility had gone eerily still, like Luna Base itself was holding its breath. He didn't know where he was walking. He just knew where to go. The path led him through maintenance tunnels and forgotten sub-halls beneath the base, areas most staff didn't even know existed. It wasn't long before he found himself in the primary docking bay, face to face with the Argonaut again. It loomed like a sleeping beast. Kyle placed his hand on the outer hull. The metal was warm. Alive. A panel slid open beneath his palm, revealing a narrow entrance not used by any crew before. No lights, no signs, just an invitation. He climbed inside. The corridor beyond was alien now, organic fibers stretched along the walls, pulsing with energy. Familiar Federation architecture had been overwritten by something far older. Kyle walked through a place that was half ship, half being. The air buzzed with static and the scent of ozone. He could feel it watching him. Not judging, not hostile, but curious, sympathetic, and waiting. It led him back to the core chamber. The orb was larger now. Its black surface shimmered with shifting patterns like oil on water. The script on the walls no longer hurt his eyes. It welcomed him, invited understanding. He stepped closer, and the core reacted, rising slightly from its cradle and emitting a hum so low it felt like thunder in his bones. Then everything around him vanished. He stood on a battlefield. Not metaphorical. Real. Thousands of miles of scorched land stretched around him, under a sky filled with fire. 2 forces clashed above, one, cold and angular, like shards of glass shaped into ships. The other, chaos, biological, ever-shifting. Neither side looked human, but in the middle of it all, Cale saw them. People. Humans. Broken. Bleeding. But still fighting. Their weapons cobbled together, their armor damaged, their eyes burning with that uniquely human refusal to die quietly. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and still winning. He saw a man take down a juggernaut using nothing but a modified mining drill. He saw a woman hijack an alien drone mid-flight and crash it into a battleship with a scream of laughter. He saw a child, barely 12, wielding tech that shouldn't exist, tearing open a rift in space-time with nothing but a thought and a stolen gauntlet. The invaders, cold, perfect, ancient, were afraid. Because humanity wasn't supposed to survive, let alone adapt. The vision shifted. He saw Earth, a future Earth, half consumed by machines and war, half pulsing with hybrid tech. Alien, human, impossible. Cities floated. Oceans were weaponized. The planet had become something new, something dangerous. And at the heart of it all, the Argonaut, orbiting silently like a seed of what was to come. Kyle dropped to his knees as the vision ended, gasping. The core pulsed in front of him again, quieter now. He understood. The Argonaut hadn't just been modified by the enemy. It had absorbed the war. Time hadn't passed the same way for it. While Earth waited for 53 years, the ship had lived through centuries of future conflict. It had watched humans rise, fall, and rise again. It had become a vessel not of metal, but of knowledge, a time-folded ark. And now it had brought that future home, not to warn Earth, to prepare it. Kyle stood slowly. "I get it now," he whispered. "They're not coming to conquer us. They're coming to stop what we're about to become." The core responded with a subtle shift in color, something between agreement and mourning. Cale turned. The corridor behind him had changed again. Footsteps echoed. A figure stepped through the shadows. Commander Darrow, weapon drawn, eyes hard. "You weren't supposed to be here," Darrow said coldly. "But I guess that ship wants you more than it wants us." Kyle didn't flinch. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand just fine," Darrow interrupted, raising the weapon. "You're the key, and we're sealing this vault before anyone turns it." Kyle stared at the barrel of Darrow's plasma pistol, the humming core behind him casting long shadows across the chamber floor. He didn't move. Didn't breathe too loud. He could see it in the commander's face. This wasn't a bluff. Darrow wasn't angry. He wasn't panicking. He was calm, resigned. That made him more dangerous than any alien threat. "You don't have to do this," Kyle said quietly. Darrow's jaw tensed. "You think I want to? I've read the logs, I've seen the crew reports. You know what's coming. You know what that thing behind you really is. You just don't care." Cale stepped forward, slowly. "I care. That's why I'm here. That ship, it didn't just survive, it learned, it adapted to something beyond anything we've ever seen, and now it's trying to give us the same chance." Darrow didn't lower the weapon. "Yeah. A chance to what, Ren? To become monsters? You saw what Earth turns into. That wasn't salvation. It was extinction wrapped in armor. They won't just come for us. They'll wipe the entire species off the map to make sure it doesn't happen again. You think we deserve to win just because we're clever?" "Number." He shook his head, his voice tightening. "That ship is a loaded gun pointed at the galaxy." Kyle felt the core pulse behind him, as if responding to Darrow's fear. "Then maybe it's time someone taught the galaxy that humanity doesn't get wiped out just because it's dangerous." The shot rang out before Kyle could finish the sentence, but it didn't hit him. The plasma bolt froze mid-air, flickering like a caged spark. It hovered between them for a heartbeat, and then unraveled into particles of blue light. Darrow stared, eyes wide. The core had stopped the shot. Kyle blinked. He hadn't even turned around. He didn't need to. The core was protecting him now, choosing him. Darrow backed away a step, his voice suddenly shaking. No, this is wrong. This is wrong. You don't even know what you're messing with. Kyle looked him dead in the eye. I do now. And with that, the core pulsed again, and everything changed. The ship shifted violently. The floor beneath them shook, groaned, morphed. The chamber split open in fractal layers, revealing conduits of light and data streaming like rivers. The walls peeled back into transparent crystal, showing Luna Base above. Chaos unfolding. Lights flashing, sirens wailing. Dozens of people had fallen unconscious across the station. Some screamed, some wept, some simply stared into nothing. The ship was reaching them. The core wasn't confined anymore. The knowledge it carried was spilling into the base like a virus, and it was choosing minds it could speak to, not through language but instinct, imagination, vision. Kyle could feel it, humanity being unlocked. He turned to Darrow, who was clutching his head now, dropping to one knee as the core's influence crashed over him like a wave. It's not trying to control us, Kyle said, almost softly. It's showing us what we're capable of. The future's already coming. We can either be ready or get flattened. Darrow looked up at him, eyes bloodshot, jaw clenched. They'll come, he growled. You think you've seen war? You've seen nothing. The ones who did this to the Argonaut? They erased entire civilizations. You think humans scare them now? Wait until they see what you've let loose. Kyle nodded slowly. I hope they do. Outside, orbiting Luna, defense satellites lit up, unprovoked. Systems triggered by a signal no one could trace. Inside the station, the cryo chambers that held the Argonaut's crew began thawing, one by one. Kyle saw it all in flashes. The engineers waking up mid-scream, the pilot punching through the stasis glass in confusion, the captain's eyes flickering with the same alien glow as the core itself. They weren't quite human anymore. But they weren't alien either. They were something new, evolved. Kyle's body pulsed with heat, with light, with knowledge pouring into him too fast to understand. But he knew this much. They weren't alone anymore, and Earth was no longer a blind little world in the corner of the galaxy. The Argonaut had returned not as a ghost, but as a harbinger. Kyle stumbled back through the shifting corridors of the Argonaut, the glow of the core still etched into his skin. His fingertips burned with invisible energy. His mind raced with fractured visions of timelines that hadn't happened yet. Somewhere deep inside, something had changed, something permanent. The ship had done more than share knowledge. It had rewritten him. Behind him, Darrow was still slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. His resistance melted into silence. Whatever the core had shown him, it had broken through that iron will, left him hollowed out and afraid. Kyle didn't wait for him to recover. Outside the ship, Luna Base was spiraling. Alarms had shifted from localized to full-scale alert. Red strobes bathed every corridor. Security personnel raced toward the docking bay, while others collapsed mid-run, struck down by the same mental overload that had taken half the station. The base's AI core had gone dark, replaced by a low rhythmic hum, echoing from every speaker like a pulse, like a heartbeat. The Argonaut had synced with the station, and Earth Command had noticed. The first strike came an hour later. A classified orbital defense platform, codenamed Thornvale, launched a barrage of kinetic warheads directly toward Luna Base. No warning, no diplomacy, just silence. And then missiles. Someone high up had decided that whatever was happening at the moon base was a threat too dangerous to contain. Better to vaporize the problem than understand it. But the missiles never landed. They stopped mid-space. Kyle, watching through the observation deck of the ship, saw them held in place, frozen like insects trapped in amber. The glow from the core had reached far beyond the station now, latching onto anything mechanical, anything digital. It twisted physics, bent logic. The warheads floated, then reversed course, slowly, elegantly, before disassembling themselves atom by atom in a synchronized shimmer. The Federation had just fired its first shot, and the Argonaut had casually swatted it away. Down in the stasis wing, the thawed crew was fully awake now. But they weren't confused. They weren't shocked. They were waiting. Captain Rhine stepped forward, a tall, gaunt man with silver-streaked hair and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. His uniform was still Federation issue, but modified. Sleek, laced with alien tech and fibers that moved like living threads. "You must be Kyle Wren," he said calmly, voice resonating oddly in the air. Kyle nodded. "I saw parts of it. What happened to you? What you became?" Rhine smiled faintly. "We didn't become anything. We simply survived longer than expected, and the ship made sure we were ready for what was coming." "What is coming?" Kyle asked. "What are we facing?" Rhine's expression darkened. "They're called the Velari Ascendancy. You haven't heard of them because they don't leave survivors. When they learned humans had discovered subspace folding, when we bent time to skip across the galaxy, they panicked. We were chaos, unpredictable. We broke rules that kept their control intact for 10,000 years. Kyle swallowed hard. And they tried to erase you." Rhine nodded. "They pulled the Argonaut into a war that hadn't reached us yet, gave us a front-row seat to humanity's future and its extinction. But the ship, she learned. She remembered. And she brought us back, not to survive, but to win. Back on Earth, the High Chancellor issued a blackout. No public communication, no media statements, no acknowledgement that Luna Base had gone silent. But within Federation High Command, panic reigned. 3 more ships had attempted to approach the Argonaut. All were rerouted mid-flight, not by any Earth technology, but by something far older, embedded now within the Argonaut's systems. An ancient defense mechanism awakened by fear. The ship had become sovereign, and Earth was no longer in charge of its own future. Kyle watched as Rhine and the remaining crew synchronized with the core again. Their minds linked effortlessly, movements coordinated without words. They were preparing for something. Charging systems Kale didn't recognize. Awakening protocols buried in alien code. He turned to Rhine. "What's the plan? You said the Velari are coming. When?" Rhine glanced at the void outside the viewplate. "They're already here." Kyle's heart jumped. Rian tapped a control panel, bringing up a projection of the solar system. Beyond Pluto, just beyond the reach of Federation sensors, space rippled unnaturally, like fabric tearing. Dozens of points flared in and out, blinks of ships, weapons, worlds folded into weapons. The Velari weren't sending scouts. They were sending an extinction fleet, and they were days away. Ryan looked at Kyle. "You're not just a witness now. You're a carrier. The core chose you. Your mind is the bridge between human evolution and survival. You don't have a choice anymore." Kyle stared out at the black void of stars. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a scientist anymore. He felt like a weapon. Kyle didn't sleep. Sleep had become a luxury of a time when the galaxy still made sense. He stood at the Argonaut's command deck, staring through the translucent walls at the growing fleet gathering behind Luna's orbit. Earth hadn't accepted the ship's return as a miracle. They'd seen it as a contamination, a threat to control. Now dozens of Federation warships were holding a tight formation, angled at the Argonaut like they were staring down a wild animal. And behind them, far beyond what any Earth sensor could detect, the real enemy was almost here. Ryan moved beside him, silent. "They still think they can stop us," Cale said quietly. Ryan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "They've been afraid of their own species since the first time someone lit fire and used it for more than warmth. They built the Federation to protect order, but all they ever really wanted was to contain us." Kyle exhaled, running a hand down his face. "They're going to fire again." "They won't get the chance," Ryan replied calmly. "They're too slow." Down in the core chamber, the crew had finished integrating the final sequence. The Argonaut no longer looked like an Earth ship at all. Her walls had shifted, organic and smooth, like veins wrapped around a skeleton of light. The air itself felt different. Thicker. Buzzing. Kyle could feel it in his bones now. He wasn't just connected, he was changing. The core had rewritten parts of his neural map. He could sense electromagnetic fields. He could predict movement. He could hear thoughts if they were close enough. And somewhere beneath it all, a new instinct had taken root. The ability to bend tech, to make machines respond like animals to a voice. And he wasn't the only one. Across the base, more scientists, those who had been exposed to the core's pulse, were reporting similar symptoms. Not full integration like Coil, but enough to blur the line between human and something new. The Argonaut had seeded them. It was creating an army, quietly, patiently. At 0600, Earth Command gave the order. It wasn't broadcast, but the Argonaut heard it anyway. A full-scale tactical wipe, 55 kinetic warheads, aimed not just at the ship, but at Luna Base itself. A containment event, dressed up in protocol. Kyle saw it unfold before anyone else even launched. His body stiffened. His eyes rolled back. The core whispered, not in fear, but in focus. "You must choose, Cale Wren." He didn't hesitate. The warheads launched. Within seconds, the core pulsed once, just once, and reality bent, time slowed. The weapons drifted through space like falling leaves. Then, without impact, without sound, they disintegrated. Not exploded, not intercepted. They were unmade. Dust, memory, nothing. The Federation ships lit up with alerts. Systems shorted. Pilots screamed into dead comms. Weapons refused to lock. Engines lost power. Gravity twisted sideways for 3 full seconds, long enough for every soldier watching to feel something wrong in their bones. Then, silence. And the Argonaut sent a signal, not in words, not in code, but in a vision broadcast into the minds of every leader across Earth and its colonies. It showed the future the Valari wanted, cities burning, skies torn open, Earth cracked like a dead moon. It showed them humans begging for mercy that would never come. Then it showed something worse. Victory. Human victory. Not clean, not righteous. Victory by assimilation. By hybrid technology, by unleashing the very things that frightened the Valari into genocide. Humans becoming beyond human. And in the middle of it all, Cale Wren. No weapon, no army, just his eyes glowing like twin stars. Back in orbit, the Federation fleet retreated. They weren't surrendering. They were stalling, trying to make sense of what they had just seen, trying to decide whether Earth should stand with Kyle or against him. Kyle turned to Ryan. "They won't help us." "No," Ryan said. "But they'll try to steal what we are becoming. They'll try to use it, twist it, until they break it." Kyle stared at the stars beyond. The Valari fleet had entered the solar system. Hundreds of ships folding into real space just beyond Saturn, the final wave. He could feel their presence already. Cold, precise, ancient, unimpressed by Earth, unimpressed by humans. They were coming to erase a problem before it spread, and Kyle was the one thing standing in their way. But he was no longer alone. The Argonaut was alive, the crew was awake, and the core was ready. They came without sound. The Volari fleet unfolded into Saturn's orbit like black wings stretching across the void. Their ships were not built, they were grown. Towering biomechanical constructs with no visible engines, no heat signatures, no transmissions. They drifted like corpses and struck like predators. One moment the system was quiet. The next, Neptune was gone, shattered into floating shards of ice and debris. Not a warning shot, a message. The Federation scrambled what ships it could, but they were scattered, uncoordinated, and outdated. Their finest vessels were designed for orbital suppression and colonial policing, not apocalyptic warfare. Kyle stood on the Argonaut's bridge, watching it all through the ship's mind. He didn't need sensors anymore. He felt the Volari as if they were a storm pressing against his skull. Cold, clinical, ancient in a way that defied time. They were not here to conquer. They were here to cleanse. The Federation issued one last desperate message. To the Argonaut, to Kale Ren, we do not support you. We do not stand against you. Do what must be done, but do not bring this war to Earth. It was a coward's cry. Kale didn't answer. Rhine moved beside him, pale light flickering in his irises. They'll test our edge first, a probe wave, standard Volari doctrine. They're searching for weakness. We don't have any, Kale replied, voice calm but distant. His mind was deeper now, half in the core, half outside time. He had grown past fear, past limits. The core had threaded through every part of him. His blood hummed with dark light particles. His thoughts bent probability like gravity. He was no longer just Kale Ren. He was what came next. And the Volari knew it. The first attack wave reached Luna's orbit 20 minutes later. 7 ships, each the size of a small city, covered in dark plating that absorbed all scans. They released a swarm of silicate organisms, half machine, half virus. They didn't fire weapons. They ate structures, bit by bit, atom by atom. The outer layer of Luna Base was breached in seconds. Federation defenses collapsed almost instantly, but the Argonaut was ready. Kyle raised his hand. Not to a control panel. Not to speak. Just a gesture. The core responded with a low roar that shook every particle of the ship. And then the Argonaut struck back. It didn't fire missiles. It rewrote reality. The core unleashed a compression wave, folding space in a ring around the ship. The Volari swarm was caught mid-attack, and for a moment nothing happened. Then each creature froze, locked in a stutter of time. Then they shattered. Not exploded. They fragmented along lines of probability, disassembling into fragments of light and data, like their very existence had been denied. Kyle didn't stop there. With a thought, he connected to Luna Base, pulling those who had been seeded, those whose minds had started to shift, to grow like his. Scientists, technicians, even a few soldiers. They responded immediately, sinking with the ship. Some collapsed under the strain, others rose as something else, a new generation of human. Kyle broadcast a single thought to them all. They think we're the virus. Let's make them right. The second Volari wave came faster. This time they didn't probe. They attacked. 50 ships descended from Saturn's shadow, weapons glowing with pure entropy. They unleashed distortion beams that tore matter into noise. Entire moons were turned inside out. Federation cruisers evaporated in the blink of an eye. But the Argonaut didn't flinch. Kyle was no longer inside it. He was it. He moved like thought. The ship bent around him like armor. Its systems obeyed his will. The core was no longer guiding him. It was listening to him. And Kale did the one thing the Valari couldn't comprehend. He adapted, in real time. He ripped open a pocket of collapsed space behind one of the Valari ships, snapping it out of existence. He unleashed biomech constructs of his own, ones that had never existed before, formed from raw thought and the core's limitless memory. He rewrote physics, and the Valari fleet faltered. They weren't used to resistance. They weren't used to fear. But now, for the first time in eons, they hesitated. One Valari ship broke rank. It didn't fire. It spoke, not with sound, not with words, but with a wave of emotion so sharp it nearly cracked Kale's mind. A single message, buried in grief and fury and dread. You were not meant to survive. You are not part of the design. Kyle responded with something cold, final. Then maybe the design was flawed, and he tore it apart with a blink. The war had begun, but for the first time in 100,000 years, the Valari weren't just fighting chaos, they were fighting humanity. And this time, humanity had learned how to fight like them. The Valari didn't retreat. They couldn't. Their entire existence was built on perfection, on control, on the erasure of anything that defied their ancient blueprint for the galaxy. Humanity wasn't just a threat. It was an insult, a glitch that had to be corrected. But Kale was no glitch. He was the answer. The Argonaut spun through the battlefield, a living spear of light and shadow. Its hull shimmered with adaptive energy, deflecting entropy beams and unraveling Valari constructs with surgical precision. The core pulsed at its heart, no longer just a power source but a mind, a collective will woven from Coil, the crew, and the countless futures the ship had witnessed. The solar system burned. Saturn's rings were shattered into glittering clouds of debris. Titan's surface boiled under stray distortion waves. Earth's skies glowed faintly red as atmospheric shields strained against the fallout of a war humanity wasn't ready to comprehend. The Federation fleet, what little remained, hung back, watching in stunned silence. They'd been reduced to spectators in their own survival. Kyle didn't care. His awareness stretched across the battlefield, a web of instinct and calculation. He saw every Valari ship, every maneuver, every flicker of their cold, ordered minds. They were fast, they were precise, but they were predictable. And humans? Humans were anything but. With a thought, Kyle unleashed a cascade of hybrid constructs, creatures born from the core's memory and his own imagination. They weren't drones or weapons. They were ideas made flesh, swarms of fractal beasts that rewrote their own code mid-flight, adapting faster than the Valari could counter. They tore through the enemy fleet like a plague, burrowing into biomechanical hulls and turning them to ash from within. The Valari responded with raw power. A flagship, larger than Luna itself, unfolded its core weapon, a singularity lance, a beam of collapsed space-time that could erase entire planets. It aimed directly at the Argonaut. Kale felt it coming before it fired. Time slowed. The core whispered, not in words, but in a flood of possibilities. He could dodge, he could counter, he could redirect the energy, or he could end this. Kyle chose. He didn't move the Argonaut. He moved himself. His body dissolved into light, into data, into the raw essence of the core's power. He became the ship, the battlefield, the war itself. His consciousness stretched across the solar system, a burning thread of defiance. The singularity lance fired, and Kale caught it, not with technology, not with force, with will. He held the beam in place, its black heart screaming against his grip. The Valari flagship shuddered, its systems overloading as it tried to push through. Cale felt their confusion, their panic, their ancient arrogance cracking like glass. "You wanted to erase us," he said, his voice echoing through every Valari mind, every human soul, every fragment of the battlefield. "But we're not your mistake. We're your future." With a final pulse, he turned the lance back on its source. The flagship didn't explode. It ceased. A silent implosion swallowed it whole, leaving nothing but a ripple in space and a stunned Valari fleet. The tide turned. The Argonaut's crew, now fully integrated, their bodies laced with alien tech and human grit, took the fight to the enemy. Ryan led a boarding assault on a Valari dreadnought, tearing through its defenses with weapons that shifted form mid-strike. The seated scientists on Luna Base unleashed makeshift arrays, bending gravity and time to trap Valari ships in loops they couldn't escape. And Earth watched. The Federation's leaders, hidden in bunkers, saw the impossible. A single ship, a handful of humans, and a man who was no longer entirely human holding back an Armageddon. But victory wasn't clean. The Argonaut was wounded. Its hull bled energy, its systems fraying under the strain of a war it was never meant to fight alone. The crew was faltering, some burned out from the core's integration, their minds unable to handle the weight of centuries poured into seconds. And Kyle was fading. He could feel it. The core had given him everything, power, knowledge, purpose, but it was burning through him. His humanity was a flickering flame, consumed by the godlike force he'd become. He had one last choice. With the Valari fleet in disarray, Cale turned his focus inward, to the core, to the ship, to the future it carried. "Ryan," he said, his voice a whisper across the ship's network. "You know what comes next." Ryan, bloodied and half-broken, nodded from the dreadnought's ruins. "We'll carry it. We'll teach them." Kyle smiled, though no one could see it. He reached into the core one final time, and he gave it everything. His memories, his fears, his hope, his humanity. The core drank it all, transforming it into a signal, a beacon that would carry the Argonaut's truth to every corner of the galaxy. A message for humanity, not just to survive, but to evolve, to become something the Valari could never predict. The Argonaut flared brighter than a star. The remaining Valari ships froze, then fled, folding into the void as their resolve shattered. And Cale Wren was gone. When the light faded, the Argonaut hung silent in Luna's orbit. The war was over. The Valari were gone. For now. The Federation emerged from its bunkers, shaken, humbled, and forced to face a new reality. The Argonaut's crew, led by Ryan, stepped onto Earth not as heroes, but as harbingers. They carried the core's knowledge, ready to seed it into a species that would never be the same. Luna Base was rebuilt. The Argonaut was studied, not as a weapon, but as a teacher. And across the colonies, whispers spread of a man who had become a myth, a scientist who had faced gods and rewritten the stars. They called him the First, not because he was the strongest, but because he was the spark. The Valari would return one day. Everyone knew it. But when they did, humanity wouldn't just fight. It would burn brighter than they could ever imagine. Epilogue. Years later, a child on a distant colony world found a fragment of alien metal buried in the soil. It hummed faintly, glowing blue under her touch. She didn't know what it was, but when she held it, she dreamed. She dreamed of a ship that sailed through time, of a war that wasn't the end, but the beginning, and of a voice, soft and certain, whispering, "You are enough."